Okay, so now we're going to move up and we're going to look at the architectural section at the floor, between the first floor and the second floor. So again, I'm drawing a cut line, but for you guys, I want you to do it. I want you to have one complete from top to bottom, and then you're going to zoom in on the parts where we're going to add the details. So layer in all your information, and then afterwards you can organize it. So far we have from the footing, we're going to go all the way to the parapet. So you're going to go from one top to bottom, and then you're going to do a zoom in at the base plate. With the one we just did in the last set of videos, and now you're going to do a zoom in at the second floor level. So what I'm showing here is, of course, the axe line is my stud, is my furring strips. And what the next thing that I've got is whether or not it's the column or whether it's the beam, but the studs stop underneath the beam. So I've got my studs, and the next thing I'm going to show is really my I-beam. And so I'm going to draw in my I-beam here. And for reference, again, I've got on the left-hand side just a sort of sample section, a steel section. Now, this isn't the section that we drew. This isn't necessarily what your section should look like. It is just a section that is a steel section that I'm just having on the side here as a reference, mostly for the levels. So I'm going to want you to put in your I-beam right under. Okay. Now, in the version that we've got, in the version that we're looking at, we've got a joist seat, remember. So we've got a piece that comes like this, and I drew that a little bit long here. So we've got that, and then remember it sort of was divided in two, and then this part kind of went off. It went like this. This was the joist seat, and then we had our webbing that went from that point on, sort of like that. Our pieces of joist, and then they met over here. And so you've got this as a block. So you just need to transfer that, just that kind of, all that in. Now we have to sort of, so let me actually just finish with the steel stuff. So we've got that. Then we know that we have the L angle that sits here, our L angle. We've got the size of that one. And we've got our steel decking that sits on top of that. And we know on top of that is our concrete, right? So all of those items we should have already. So this is our concrete. Okay. So in the architecture, for the first couple of things that we're going to add are going to be some important elements of insulation and as fire retardant. So remember when we saw the presentation on fire retardant, we saw that this exposed steel here of the joist is something that we're going to need to cover in fire retardant. So we're going to have to go ahead and cover this whole structure in a fire retardant, and we're going to show that in the architecture. So we're going to cover all this area in a fire retardant. And so that all the joists are covered. So you're going to sort of make a wobbly line that goes all around and hatch all this in gray, or usually we do it in gray. And over each member that extends down and over the bottom part. So that's what we're going to want to show there. The next thing is we're going to want to, find a way to insulate inside this I-beam. Because obviously, if this is cold, remember this is outside again, this is inside. And if this is insulated in this part of the wall, but not this part. Well, certainly the cold can go right through. So we don't want that. So we're going to have to do something a little bit maybe seeming kind of funny, but we're going to have to put in 2 mini studs and some insulation. So within here, we're actually going to draw these little mini studs that kind of come in here like this. They're like little mini studs, and they kind of sit right inside the I-beam. They don't go out further than the wall, so they're each about 2.5 each, actually. And don't forget this whole width is 6, and inside that is going to be insulation. So we've got insulation inside. So my wobbles aren't very nice, but we've got that coming in. Okay, so I think that makes sense, right? So that's a way to stop the cold from coming in there. But now what about here on this section? Because on that section, the joists are, spaced, and we would have insulation. We would need to put insulation there as well. So we're going to have to add insulation on top, and we're going to show the wobbles here, the insulation that kind of goes in between all the joist seats. So that's one thing. Another thing, we're going to have underneath all the steel decking also, we're going to have honeycomb. So I can't really draw honeycomb well by sketching, but you're going to want to have it underneath each one of these little parts of the steel decking. So we're going to add that in. So now that we've got those parts, we're going to want to, so on the inside of our wall, we know that we've got gypsum here, but we've always sort of carried it forward, upwards, up until a certain point. Well, now we know we've got to bring it all the way actually up to the top, because that's a protection that we need. So we're going to want to bring this gypsum all the way up right to here. And we're going to want to put again, a caulking bead right at the top. So our gypsum goes all the way to the top. That's our gypsum. And let me just erase these arrows. And then what's next? So our gypsum on that side. On the outside, what do we have normally right on the surface of the stud is our sheathing. And we're going to want to show the sheathing as nice and continuous, and it goes all the way, it extends all the way over the floor, the junction of the floor. It's hard to draw a straight line. But so that's our sheathing, and it's going to continue up. And then our blown insulation is going to continue over that. And then the airspace and the brick. And I'm not going to draw every single brick because it's going to take a little bit of time. So I'm just going to come in and put a little bit of texture on that. So these are bricks. You're going to want your honeycomb insulation. Whoops. Honeycomb insulation here. You're going to want to show this as your sheathing. Whoop. I've got the eraser on for some reason. So your plywood hatch on this sheathing, use that one. And then above here, we're going to want to start the same thing over a little bit that we had on our foundation wall. So we're going to want to put our stud in, a 6-inch stud. And underneath the stud, we've got our compressible foam. And we've got our 2 caulking beads here. We want those as well. And then we just continue with the same idea up with our furring, and then the gypsum, the finished floor, and our baseboard that goes there. And we still need insulation here, of course. And all this continues up as well. So the next things that we're going to want to do is we're going to start to want to label. So we're going to go and we're going to want to label our different compositions. So from here to here, arrow here, dot here, this is going to be our F2, our flooring number 2. We can reinforce this, and don't forget there's brick that continues all the way up here, and I just haven't drawn it in. So you've got your brick over here too. It's got to go the whole way up. I just don't want to spend the time drawing it. So we've got our, and actually do this just above the baseboard so you don't include the baseboard. But this is again W1. I don't like where that's positioned. I'm going to put it higher. It's just going to get in the way of things. All right, W1 is that composition. You just reinforce what that is. The next thing is we have a couple of layers that elevation levels, not layers, but elevation levels. So remember that we have 2 top of, this is an important one for architecture, top of slab. So top here, I put in the wrong spot. X, whatever level it is, top of slab on the 2nd floor. And we also want the top of the steel. Remember, the top of the steel isn't the top of the decking. It's the top of the joist. It's basically the floor level. So you can hear the wind is still howling here. Top of steel, 2nd floor. So you want to make sure you have those elevations in. Now we want to add a couple of notes. So what do we want to add? We want to add, again, we're going to have a 4-inch baseboard, a vinyl baseboard. And we're going to want to, we could point out the joist. Well, the joist actually will be part of F2, so we're going to leave that for a minute. We want to show in our foam gasket. So we want to add that foam gasket. We want to add our caulking on backer rods, wherever you find is the best place to put the arrows for that. I'm not crazy about that, but I wanted to leave the bottom part a little bit free. So I want to add my caulking on backer rods. Okay, so after that, we've got a couple of things that we want to show. So we want to basically show what we're doing here. We want to show this insulation. So we're going to use a blown insulation. So we're going to talk about blown insulation there. We're going to do 2.5 inch metal studs. Metal studs at 16 center on center with spray insulation. We can point out the steel beam, steel beam, and for all those elements, we always see the structure. And this stud at the top has a very special name. And it's not top stud or anything. In this case, it's called a deflection track. And it's called a deflection track because it needs to have quite a bit of a movement allowed at the top and bottom. So it allows for a movement up and down. And that's really important. It's really important because if the wall moves, if there's seismic movements, if there's expansion, all that, it really needs to be accessible. So that's it for this part. So we could, don't forget, we want here, this is our open web steel joist. And we are going to see structural drawings. And we're going to mention the spray applied fireproofing. Proofing. That wasn't very clear. Proofing. Spray applied fireproofing. Okay, so that's it for this part, and then we'll go up to do the parapet.